Hey, sometimes even the worst games aren't all bad. 9 out of 10 parts of it might be terrible, but there's that one little chunk that might actually be interesting. Some of our least favorite video games have a few decent ideas that we can appreciate. So I know we might sound like we're doing crazy talk with this one, but hear us out. Here are 10 bad games with one good thing in it. Starting off at number 10, so one of the absolute worst things to come from late stage Konami, you probably know, it's Metal Gear Survive. It's a game that nobody asked for, nobody really wanted, and nobody really expected. It took the leftovers of Metal Gear Solid 5 and kind of like puppeteered the corpse to make this weird survival game thing. It felt kind of terrible. It felt like a cynical cash grab because these types of games were all the rage at that point. It barely had anything to do with Metal Gear. It was just in the title. It used the Fox engine, sure, but that's it. It had none of the charm or storytelling of the original games, but it does actually have a neat concept for a video game when you actually dive into it. Right, so the game drops you into a map full of dangerous zombie-like creatures and forces you to build defenses around your base before exploring deeper into the fog. These giant creatures reside in the dangerous depths of the map, and you'll slowly scout more areas as you collect materials and craft better weapons, better facilities, and better tools. The game forces you to play very carefully. You gotta be super cautious and essentially craft your way up from nothing, which is just a fun video game concept. Plus, using the Metal Gear Solid 5 engine and like the gameplay and the movement and shooting systems just makes it even stronger. Building a base and having to defend it against a constant threat while also exploring a map, you know, it is the kind of video gamey stuff we crave. I think at that point though, and especially with me personally as a diehard Metal Gear fan, like all the goodwill was lost, so you kind of couldn't help but look at this one without like a negative bias. And ultimately, trust us, like here at Game Ranks, a lot of us played probably too much of it. There are a couple of bullet points in there that are actually good ideas. It's just the final package, how it all came together, just kind of dissatisfying. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Next, over at number 9, The Medium. A game that some people call bad. Yes, I would call it kind of middle of the road. Definitely wasted potential. This was Bloober Team's game before they made the Silent Hill 2 remake, which is why I guess some people, were pretty skeptical of that game. In The Medium, players mostly explore this abandoned hotel while simultaneously existing in both the real world and the afterlife. So the big gimmick allows you to see your character in both universes at the same time. Kind of like a normal gray, foggy world, and then like a dingy, grimy, monstrous world. So again, you're seeing your character in both places at the same time, and you're solving puzzles and actually sometimes avoiding danger that only exist in one world or the other. Playing a single player game in split screen with 2 different viewpoints is a neat idea, something we'd love to see done better in another game, because like I said, The Medium was pretty flat. It ended up being kind of dull. The environments look great, and the afterlife is just really, really cool looking, but gameplay-wise, it felt really sterile, really simple, and the story was messy. But again, at the core of it, like some of the sequences where the game really tried to push that whole 2-screen thing, it felt really creative, really unique. It's something that some games have kind of played around with, but never went all in on like the simultaneous aspect quite like The Medium. It was special for that, and honestly, it's the only thing that we're ever gonna remember about this game, unfortunately. Next at number 8, Wanted Dead. This game took a big swing. If you've never heard of this weird third-person shooter, you're in for a lot. This is a game that just assaults your senses and never lets go for a very brief runtime. It's throwing news clips, anime cutscenes, weird cafeteria eating scenes, karaoke minigames, violence, and all at you just within an hour. It's kind of like a Suda51 game if it was even more zany. And the gameplay is so solid, we're actually even struggling to call this one a bad game. This is like maybe so bad it's good? I don't know. Look, it's a third-person shooter that moves really fast, forcing you to take cover, pop some heads, and then sprint into close combat. You're always armed with a katana and a sidearm that will auto-aim on anyone that's nearby. That combination of like the smooth shooting and melee combat makes Wanted Dead feel a little different than your average third-person shooter. And the gameplay only gets crazier as you progress further through the game. game. The melee combat is much more elaborate than something like Gears of War, but also simple enough that it doesn't get in the way of the shooting. It's a very difficult balancing act, and something we'd like to see done well like this in more video games. The biggest problem with Wanted Dead, and the reason it belongs on a list like this, because this has to be like one of the more blatantly unfinished games we've seen in a while. Literally everything in the game gets set up and then doesn't get resolved, and it really only adds more questions to the pile. Maybe that's just this game's style, maybe the answers never really mattered. It's all about the karaoke mini games and the creativity and the shooting and the whatnot. Too bad even a lot of that stuff stops after the first 2 hours. Let's get a Wanted Dead that doesn't fall apart like a House of Cards in its second half, please. If they did a Wanted Dead 2, it could absolutely crush it. Next at number 7, Colossal Cave. This game has such a simple premise, it's almost elemental. It's also just a great idea. Starting off in your little shack, you'll go explore the titular Colossal Cave in search of treasure. That's it. There's no backstory, there's no drama, there's no villains, there's no real heroes. You're just a person looking to collect lots of treasures in this infamously dangerous dungeon. It's so simple, artfully simple, because Colossal Cave is one of the oldest commercial adventure games. Originally, it was a text adventure, so remaking the game in full 3D is also a pretty great idea. It's unfortunate that this spelunking adventure just turned out so rough. Colossal Cave is much more of a puzzle game than an actual dungeon crawler. While there are enemies to fight, enemies literally appear in random battles, most of the time you'll be looking for items and using those items to get past obstacles.
Congratulations. You just vanquished a dragon with your bare hands. Unbelievable, isn't it?
We love the idea of this giant cave full of weird creatures and strange puzzles to solve that you can tackle in any order. It's cool. Modernizing text adventure games also is a cool-ass idea. As little tiny babies growing up, we tried to play some of these text-only games, and the learning curve is just really steep. So give us a 3D world to walk around in and objectives we can see clearly, while kind of carrying some of the feel and ideas from those texts. It can all just be a doable, fun thing. At least they should. Colossal Cave follows the same moon logic that plagued early adventure games. Nothing in this cave makes sense, and none of the puzzles have been modernized at all. This is the type of game where you use every item on every object until something works. It gets tedious, and when you get something to work, oftentimes you have no idea why it even worked in the first place. Look, we love the idea, but the concept could use some work. A lot of work. Next at number 6, Fear 3 took that blazingly fast, sharp first-person shooter gunplay from the first 2 games and just kind of made it worse. This sequel was taken away from the original developers at Monolith and turned into a cooperative 2-player shooter that nobody wanted and nobody asked for and nobody really ended up liking. And it still had one neat little idea in it. So one player is your standard first-person shooting main, while the second player gets to be the ghost of the series villain.
If you must save a woman, the fastest way is through the houses, not around them.
This ghostly guy can float around, lobbing psychic energy, but his most impressive power is just the ability to hijack enemies and then play as them. That means the second player has a totally different set of abilities and uses, which is a neat little concept for a first-person shooter. It would have been a cool idea if the game used it at all to good effect. You can play the entire game in single player with one or the other character, and there's no point really where both characters need to work together to solve puzzles or use their unique skills together. There's no creativity to these ideas. It's just a good idea and then nothing else flexed around it. Despite being a cool guy or a ghost guy, it still ends up just being a bog standard shooter that takes the horror trappings of Fear and just makes everything more generic. And the story doesn't matter as much. The guns feel bland. Look at the shotgun. And the co-op just unfortunately ended up sucking the life out of the game. But at the end of the day, again, the point of this video, one good thing in a bad game, here it's hijacking enemies to help your buddy. That's cool. Next at number 5, we're flying close to the sun here. Mass Effect Andromeda isn't a bad game in the way some other games on this list are bad. It's a somewhat competent title that just pales in comparison to its way better predecessors. It's a game that tried to modernize Mass Effect a little bit, but ended up putting the series on ice for even longer. And Andromeda technically was a disaster at launch, and even after years of fixes, you know, the unfulfilling story and less exciting aliens and companions killed what could have been a great little game. First off, putting Mass Effect in a new galaxy with new aliens is an interesting idea. We understand shedding the Mass Effect baggage, like maybe was what the series needed to move forward after the big, huge ending of Mass Effect 3, but it only made the series' biggest fans angry. And the updates to the gameplay feel totally natural, giving your team jetpacks to double jump around the much bigger environments. You could launch directly towards your enemies. It was cool. The concept of the combat system was a breath of fresh air for an RPG. A lot more freedom to move around and take out enemies a little more stylishly. It's a lot of fun when you get the hang of it and you got a lot of abilities, and we'd be surprised if future Mass Effect games glued our feet back on the floor. That's really it with Andromeda. It's like, what if it was Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, but you could zip around on a cool jetpack? What if you were faster? That's the good idea here. The combat is decent in Andromeda. It's just everything else that drags the game down. Next at number 4, genuinely one of the best ideas for a multiplayer game in years here. Meet Your Maker is another game that isn't strictly bad, it's more flawed, like heavily flawed. This is a clever little multiplayer game about building deadly obstacle courses and then challenging your friends to beat them. You get tools and unlock new gimmicks the more you defeat the foolish players trying to overcome your torture chambers, and you even get to place little enemies to shoot. Like, it's a genius idea. It's like a dungeon keeper first-person shooter sci-fi thing, and it also feels distinctly kind of like an old-school PC game, but it's just got significant notable problems. So Meet Your Maker severely limits itself by making everything kill in a single hit. There's no fun puzzle solving or speedrunning or even just overcoming waves of enemies. It's more about carefully observing each area and trying not to die instantly from spikes. Every level only has one mode, Death Trap. And unlike other creative games like Trials that include tools to make your own levels, there's no incentive to make levels that are just fun or different or unique. It's all about just trying to destroy the other person. And I get the whole one-hit kill thing. From an idea concept, it is creative. We love plenty of games where things are short and sweet like that, but here it just didn't land. It didn't really let the idea breathe. Meet Your Maker honestly is a concept that's still worth building up. We want to dodge more than just like a lot of spikes or a couple of ugly enemies. Next at number 3, there's a lot to love and a lot to hate in Deadly Premonition. These games are like cult classics for a reason. The people that love them, love them. I don't know if it's like a so bad it's good thing, whatever. It's like a Twin Peaks homage that really lets you feel kind of like an investigator exploring a weird little world. This town of Greenvale is filled with mysteries you gotta discover yourself, because many of the in-game events will only happen after progressing through weird side quests, or by literally following the townsfolk around in their cars to see what actually happens next. So this is what kind of has worked. Gamers have obsessively pored over every little detail in Deadly Premonition, and for good reason. At its heart, this is the type of extremely weird, janky game only a developer with a very clear creative vision could create. But we'd really like a version that wasn't this buggy. Deadly Premonition's core concept is something we love. Playing a weirdo detective investigating a completely inexplicable murder case is exactly the kind of thing games should explore more, man. We don't even need like big budget here. The charming graphics and voice acting are the aspects of Deadly Premonition that really appeal to people. It's just that terrible combat, the bugs, the glitches, and the crashing. There were so many crashes in this game, and it's only gotten worse in the Director's Cut editions. Deadly Premonition, as a video game concept, should just be an easy slam dunk, but Deadly Premonition 2, A Blessing in Disguise, made us realize maybe it's a lot harder to make a good Deadly Premonition game than we thought, and maybe the first game is the best we're ever gonna get. Deadly Premonition 2 is quite a disaster. It's almost shocking it was released commercially on the Nintendo Switch in that state. We just want a Deadly Premonition style game that isn't held together with like bits of string and duct tape. Is that too much to ask? Because underneath, it's beautiful. Now down at number 2, enough of the controversial takes on here, we already pissed some people off. Let's get back to basics. Bad, big budget games. Dead Space 3 is another competent game, yes, that only looks bad in comparison to its atmospheric originals. Dead Space 1 and 2 are classics in the survival horror canon, both incredibly well-made games that learn useful lessons from Resident Evil 4 and kind of run with it all. These are games that took good ideas and made them better, and put them in a cool sci-fi setting with some cool lore. But Dead Space 3 kind of softens all the unique edges of the series by yet again creating a cooperative game that doesn't need to be played in co-op. Unlike Fear 3, the feature we like the most has nothing to do with the characters. In Dead Space 3, you'll eventually get the ability to build your own weapons. And this, as a feature, on paper, is supremely cool. You can craft any weapon you want and combine abilities to cover your bases and help your buddies fend off monsters. You can create overpowered weapons, like the infamous example of a rocket launcher you can mod to remove player damage. That means you can just drop rockets directly at your feet. And because the ammo system is so simplified, you'll always collect generic bullets that can be used in any weapon. So you've got a rocket launcher you can use forever that doesn't hurt you if you're creative enough. That's an awesome feature. It also completely ruins the game because infinite ammo is kind of like the antithesis of survival horror. We don't need power fantasy superpower shit in these types of games, You want to feel desperate. In Dead Space 3, you're not really needing to carefully scrounge for more ammo or even fight that carefully. You can just use your cool Frankenstein guns to kill everything easily. And the consequences don't really matter much. Even the enemies are less interesting to compensate for guns because the game doesn't know what you'll have. This is a feature that we'd love to see in more games. It's really, really cool to make your own weapons in this style, but just maybe not in Dead Space, or maybe not quite in a survival horror game. Look, we have no idea how to implement it and make it feel good. We're not the game developers. That's for you guys to figure out, but still.
The tram will arrive shortly. Please stand by.
Now at number 1, in a list of very flawed games, Quantum Error is probably the worst. The inexplicable first-person shooter is incredibly difficult to explain. So even after playing for a while, we still have no idea what the game is really about. One thing we do know is that it has weirdly in-depth firefighting mechanics. After an hour of cutscenes in space, then gameplay in a war-torn future street, you're finally dumped into a training area that looks suspiciously like default Unreal Engine assets. This is where the game gets interesting though. You'll collect a set of firefighting tools that you grab from your inventory to safely explore and get through obstacles. So you have a pry bar, a respirator, jaws of life, an axe, and other items, and you'll be forced to check doors before opening them. A hot door, of course, means there's danger of backblast. It's an interesting concept for a horror game, and it adds more depth to exploring a facility that's overrun with monsters. Dealing with real dangers in a burning building is something we haven't really seen done quite like this in a first-person shooter. But unfortunately, it's also hard to overstate how bad Quantum Error is. This is a game with ideas. Way too many ideas, though. We're jumping around from futuristic war zones to space dig sites to secret facilities, all filled with exposition dumps and characters we don't know, talking about things we'll never really understand. And that's all before you ever get your first gun and shoot your first monster. A thing that this game is supposed to be about. Quantum Error has a million weird ideas, and it seems like a couple of them are good, specifically all this firefighting tech. Put that in more games.
Floors 1 through 3 have sustained critical damage. Please remain calm. Locate the nearest emergency exit and evacuate the facility.
But those are 10 bad or forgettable games that have something good about them. Look, we also have to be totally honest here. We absolutely love some of the bad games on this list, so don't hate on us too hard. But if you've got a favorite bad game with a great idea, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear more ideas. It's fun. If you like this video and you like talking games with us every single day, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing because we put out videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.